start with the idea that I think we also talked about the distinction between a change in supply versus a change in quantity supplied. Whenever supply curve shifts either from S1 to S3 or from S1 to S2, we are going to call that a change in supply, and it should be quite intuitive if you look at the original price P1 at that P1 price. Anytime your supply curve shifts, let's say from S1 to S2, quantity supplied changes from Q1 to Q3. But in this case, this change is actually a change in supply because your supply curve shifted. If, on the other hand, there was just a change in price, let's say from P1 to P2, your quantity demand supplied would simply change from, let's say, Q2 to Q4. What I'm trying to say is that anytime price changes, you move along the same supply curve, and it is called a change in quantity supplied. Anytime something other than price changes, your supply curve shifts, and we call that a change in supply. So shift, change in supply, movement along the supply curve, change in quantity supplied. So this is how you should associate these words with. So the next task, just like the demand side, is to figure out the factors that change the supply side of the market. We are looking at a whole host of factors that is going to change the supply curve, shift the supply curve. Let's go over each of them separately. The first one, I think the most important one, is to think about how input prices affect supply. So before we start talking about that, let us remind ourselves that our suppliers are the producers in this economy. They are not like retailers who buy stuff from wholesalers and sell it in the marketplace. In our conventional model, suppliers are also the producers, which means that they buy factors of production, raw materials from the factor market, use that in the production process, and after they have produced something, they supply that in the market. So anytime there is a change in the price of inputs, it is going to affect the cost of production for our firm. So the examples of factors are, we are thinking about smartphone production, labor is a factor, plastic housing is a factor, computer processor is a factor. Anytime there is an increase in the price of an input, what happens? So imagine that a producer is using a wide array of factors that in the production process, whenever the price of one of the factors increases, his cost of production increases. So increase in the price of input is going to increase cost. And whenever cost increases, profit goes down. Okay, that's the basic intuition. From our perspective, our firms are mindless organizational unit that only cares about profit. So whenever there's an increase in price of input, it increases their cost of production. When cost increases, their profit margin goes down. Are we all clear on that? There's nothing magic about this. We want to keep the supply side of the market quite simple. So if cost of production increases, profit margin goes down, our firms sell less. Supply curve shifts to the left. So an increase in the cost of production causes supply curve to shift to the left, like the one that you're seeing in the top. The next one is technological change. Now, we are going to come back to technological change at least several times in this course. The idea of technological change is fairly important. Now, sometime today or tomorrow, I'm going to upload a video which I'm creating for another class, which will talk about the same things that we are talking about here. But then, in that context, we are going to change the word technological change this is the problem of oh man. Okay, I guess this is okay. Okay, so what we're going to do, we are going to try to think about using the word technological change with the word productivity. They mean the same thing. So what is productivity? Productivity is measured by something like this. Productivity, PROD, a shorthand is Y divided by L. Y means output and L means labor. So productivity actually measures how much output you can produce with the given amount of input. We want to understand that from an economics perspective. For economics, productivity is a good way of telling you a lot about the production process. For example, to begin with, we want this number to be as large as possible. Do we all see that? We want our productivity to be as large as possible. What does it mean? It means that if we are planning to make more profit, if we want to be more efficient, we want to be able to produce a lot of output with a little bit of inputs. So an increase in productivity, therefore, is good for our firm. So the question is, how can productivity be increased? How can a firm increase its productivity? This is a very general question. The answer to that question can be several things. In your macro course, we are going to talk about productivity in the context of an industrial organization, where firms can sometimes reorganize their industrial activities, management activities, and they can gain productivity. In a more rudimentary course, our main answer to a productivity gain will be technological change, which is simply finding better ways of producing things. So technological change are innovations or inventions. Both of them are important. Think about internet, think about electricity, think about all the massive technological change that has occurred to our production process in the last 100 years. So technological change is kind of important when we are looking at the supply decisions of our firm. Now, whenever there is a technological change or there is a productivity gain, the first thing that it does, it lowers firm's cost of production. That is very important because, again, firms are this mindless organization which only cares about their profit. Anytime there is a productivity gain, anytime there is a technological change, it reduces the cost of production, therefore increases profit margins. If technological change increases productivity, causes technological change, and that reduces the cost of production, it is going to cause our supply curve to shift to the right. So a technological change is always indicated by a rightward shift of the supply curve. Okay? But again, there can be much broader implications of technological change. The examples that you're looking at are pure technological changes, in the sense that you come up with better seeds to produce your agricultural production, you come up with better or stronger machines that can help you to produce goods things. These are classic or pure examples of technological change. But then there can be things that are difficult to quantify, such as an assembly line. Anyone familiar with what an assembly line is? An assembly line is an organizational innovation that was adopted by Ford at the beginning of this century, which caused the cost of production of a car, which reduced the cost of production of a car by 70%. I think it was even more than that. So by adopting just an organizational innovation where rather than a lot of people working on a single car, everyone was assigned to working on only one part of a car, the idea of assembly line dramatically reduced the cost of production for Ford, dramatically increase the profit margin for Ford, and the rest is history, right? So these are the kind of things that we are talking about when we are talking about technological change. Okay. There are more deeper understanding of technological change. There can be, like when we think about government can also playing a role in the technological change, which I do not want to talk about at this point of time. In the next chapter, after our exam 1, we are going to have a broader discussion about the role of government, where we are going to bring this model and then we are going to talk about how the government can affect market equilibrium outcomes. Okay, so the next one is this idea of the prices of substitutes and the number of firms. Two things discussed in the same context. Let's start with the first one. So in the demand side, we talked about this idea that goods can be substitute or goods can be complements. In the context of a demand, complementary goods or substitute goods that are goods that you either buy together or you buy one for the another one. Coke and Pepsi was substitute, and sugar and coffee were complementary goods for a buyer when he is buying things, right? Are we all clear on that? We are now changing to the other side of the market, where we are now thinking about, can a producer also have substitute goods and complementary goods? The answer is yes. A producer can and will have substitute goods and complementary goods. The example that this one provides is an example where soybean and corn are produced at the same place. Okay? So a farmer has a piece of land where the production of soybean and the production of corn requires almost identical land conditions, fertilizer conditions. So from the production perspective, these two goods are substitute for our farmer. Are we all clear on that? He can either produce corn, he can either produce soybean, or he can produce a combination of those two. Not all production are the same, by the way. There are goods which are not substitute at all, but then there are goods which are indeed substitutes. Okay? In production. So the idea is simple. When you have an increase in the price of soybean, right? So the price of soybean is rising. So our producer is seeing that soybean is making him more profit, right? So he is going to switch resources from corn and start producing more soybean. So if he starts producing more soybean, he is going to produce less corn. Yes.
Will the price of soybeans ever be increasing in price for the producer, or is it always like, since the price is increasing soybeans for the consumer?
When the price of a product increases in the marketplace, it is going to increase for both the buyer and the seller, something that we're going to look at in about 5 minutes from now. That's a very important question, and thank you for raising that. At this point, we really do not have seen that, because we have so far been concerned only on the consumer side or on the producer side, but then we are going to talk about equilibrium, where we're going to bring the market and we're going to see how prices affect both the buyer and the seller. For this discussion, when these two goods are substitute in production, an increase in price of one of the substitute goods, in this case soybean, leads to the reduction in the production of the other good, less corn, right? So what is this graph that you're looking at? This is a graph that is talking about the production and supply of corn, right? So you are thinking about what will happen to the supply of corn when the price of soybean increases, right? So when the price of soybean increases, I know that my quantity supplied for soybean is going to go up, right? Right? According to the law of supply. So if my quantity supplied for soybean increases, I'm going to allocate more resources towards the production of soybean. My supply for corn goes down. right? Indicated by a leftward shift of the supply curve. Okay. The next one is straightforward. The size of the market is very simple, just like the size of the consumers. When the size of the consumers increased, our demand shifted to the right. Why? Because our market demand is a sum of individual demand. Just like the demand curve, our supply curve or our market supply curve is the sum of individual supply. So anytime there are more firms in the market, it means that the market supply will expand, which is going to be indicated by a rightward shift of the supply curve. Very straightforward. Makes sense? Okay? So that's straightforward. The next one is rather critical and important. We have talked about how expected future price affected the demand for consumers today. And we talked about these two situations where the goods are perishable and goods are non-perishable. And the same kind of reasoning is going to be applied to the production side, but we are going to see that how producers respond to future prices are fundamentally different from the way consumers respond to future prices. Okay? In order to understand how expected future price affects your current decisions, the first thing that we need to figure out is to get an idea about what production is. For a firm, production is taking inputs and turning them into production, final goods, right? Now, in that process, we always bring a term that we have not yet introduced so far, but those of you who have taken macro course are probably familiar with that. This idea is called inventory. On the consumer side, we really did not talk about this idea. We just said that whenever expected future price goes up, our consumer goes to the market today, buys a lot of stuff. What is our consumer doing? He's piling this good in his garage or in the basement, right? He's buying a lot of stuff today because he knows in the future prices are going to go up. This is called hoarding or whatever, right? This is, in some context, not a rational behavior. Our firms do very similar things, but we call it inventory because inventory is kind of critical. So what is inventory? Anyone? It's a macro concept. For a macroeconomic side, inventory is part of the production that firms do not sell or cannot sell. The distinction is kind of important for your macro course. It is not important here. So inventory is the part of production that firms do not sell into the marketplace. What does that mean? It means that they do have production, the stuff is already being produced, but rather than selling it in the market, they keep it in somewhere else, right? Like, a car company, automobile industry, keeping part of their car in this so-called inventory. Like if you go to Pizza Hut, there will be a lot of semi-cooked pizza in the refrigerator. These are all examples of inventory. So how expected future price affects our supplier's decision today is mainly going to be discussed through the lens of inventory. So let's imagine what is happening. Okay, so our firm anticipates, so it's an expectation that price of its product is going to be higher in the future. Key critical words: anticipation, future, higher price. So he's an expectation that in the future, the stuff that he's selling today is going to be higher, will have a higher price. So what does our producer do? His first intuition would be to not sell the good today, keep it for future, and when future comes, the prices are higher, he sells them. Are we all clear on that? So whenever there is an expected increase in future price, our producer is going to pile up their inventory. They are going to put the stuff that they produce today in the inventory, not sell them today. So when tomorrow comes, they are going to sell that in the future. But for today, an expected future increase in price reduces the amount of output they supply in the market. Makes sense? Well, but obviously it depends on what kind of goods you're talking about, right? Just like we talked about the consumer side. Because a firm cannot hold inventory for everything that they produce, right? So we need to now talk about whether the good is perishable or non-perishable. If you're thinking about milk, right? A firm simply cannot have a large inventory of milk that they want to sell 2 years from now. Are we all clear on that? So that's not going to happen. The only thing this logic that we just talked about makes sense is when our goods are non-perishable. So if our goods are non-perishable and our firms are expecting that in the future the price of their products are going to go up, their supply today goes down. Today their supply goes down. Their supply takes a leftward shift. Example. Sorry, any question? Okay. A very interesting discussion about a movie. I always like movie examples. Today I am running out of time, so I'll skip this one. Okay. We're going to conclude our discussion about the supply side by looking at the distinction between change in supply and change in quantity supplied one more time. The reason why we are talking about the distinction between change in demand or supply and change in quantity demanded or supplied is because they are very important. And in the exam, you are regularly going to make mistakes on this. Just to remind ourselves one more time, if the supplier is just moving from A to B, when the price is just increasing from 200 to 250, this movement from A to B is called movement along the supply curve, and the change in supply from 10 to 11 is called change in quantity supplied. If for some reason our producer moves from point B to C, from point B to C, this is at the same price, the change in supply is from 10 to 13, and that will be a change in supply and not change in quantity supplied. Right? So any kind of change that is caused by a movement along the curve is called change in quantity supplied or quantity demanded. And anytime a change is caused by a shift of the supply curve or the demand curve, it is called a change in demand or a change in supply. These are identical concepts on the two sides of the market. Any question? Okay, now we are at the last part of this chapter. I'm going to skip some of these questions. I guess we at least need to take a look at least one of these questions, because these are the questions that you will be expecting in the exam, and our watch is like acting crazy. Can someone take a look at the watch? You see what the watch is doing? It's strange. What just happened? This only happens in Bermuda Triangle, right? Okay, that was creepy. Okay, let's look at an example. Okay, so which one is the correct answer? So whenever there is a increase in the price of the input, that means supply curve shifts to the left, straightforward. The answer is A. Let's move on. Yeah, this one is kind of interesting. Okay, so the one that we are going to look at is when your demand, in this case A, its demand is increasing, and we are going to look at a situation where your demand is decreasing, and we want to see how it affects the market equilibrium. So let's imagine that we start with a position where the market is in equilibrium, P star and Q star. This is my D, this is my S. And we are thinking about a situation where market demand increases. Let's say from D to D1. When market demand increases, we can see clearly that equilibrium price goes up, equilibrium quantity goes up. So whenever demand increases, conclusion is that equilibrium price will go up, equilibrium quantity will go up. We move from point A to point B. A was original market equilibrium. As a result of rightward shift of the demand curve, your market equilibrium price increases from P star to P1. Your market equilibrium quantity increases from Q star to Q1. The opposite picture can be seen when the market demand goes down for variety of factors that we have covered before. Again, we are going to start with market equilibrium quantity of P star and Q star, original supply, original demand, and suddenly my demand decreases from D to D1. When my demand decreases from D to D1, my supply curve does not change. The original equilibrium was at point A, which was at the intersection between the original demand curve D, original supply curve S. We now have a new equilibrium of point B, where we have equilibrium with the new demand curve, let's call it D1, and the old supply curve, because the supply curve did not change. In this case, it should be clear that equilibrium quantity goes down from Q star to Q1, and equilibrium price goes down from P star to P1. So when demand goes down, equilibrium price goes down, equilibrium quantity goes down. Okay? Does it make sense? The next one is 2 when supply change. And case 1 is supply increase, case 2 is supply goes down. When we look at an increase in supply, we start with original market equilibrium quantity of demand and supply. Supply increasing from S to S1 causes equilibrium price to go down and equilibrium quantity to go up. So when supply increases, price goes down, equilibrium quantity goes up. Okay? Makes sense. On the other side, if supply goes down, you have demand supply curve, market equilibrium, then supply shifts to the left because supply is going down. A decrease in supply is indicated by a leftward shift of the supply curve. From S to S1, we see that the equilibrium price goes up, equilibrium quantity goes down. So when supply goes down, equilibrium price goes up, equilibrium quantity goes down. Very different effect, right? So anytime there is a change in demand side, or then there is a change in the supply side, your market equilibrium, price and quantity is going to change. The critical point is when both of them changes at the same time. So I'm going to just do one of these problem, and I'm going to upload a video where it will show a different combinations of problems. Please stay with me. I have we have like 4 minutes. I think I'll be done, with that. Okay, let's open one of these. Any question before we start? Does it make sense? Do we understand how changes in the demand side or changes in the supply side really affects the market equilibrium? Okay, let's now look at one of them. I'll also give this to my SI leaders. They will also go over this in the exam review. Okay. Let's now think about 3 where both demand and supply change. And for the sake of simplicity, we are going to assume where both demand and supply increase at the same time. Okay? Both demand and supply increases. How does it affect the market equilibrium? I'm going to look at case 1, and I'm going to look at case 2, and I'm going to distinguish between how different they are. The first one that I'm going to look at is, we'll always start with the original market equilibrium. So that's P star and Q star, DS. Okay, the first one that I'm going to consider is the demand curve shifts to the right and the supply curve shifts to the right as well, because both demand and supply increases, but shift in demand is greater than shift in supply. Do you all see that? The amount of shift that our demand curve has made is quite large compared to the amount of shift our supply has made. what this will do is that we are now going to have equilibrium at the intersection between the new supply curve and the new demand curve. So A original demand equilibrium, B original new equilibrium, price increases, quantity increases. So price increases. So case 1, price increases, quantity increases. The next case is again same market equilibrium, P star, Q star, D, S, but in this case the shift in supply is larger than the shift in demand. So shift in demand is less than supply. Do you all see that? It's a fundamentally different experiment. In this case, the original market equilibrium was A, the new market equilibrium is B. What you see is that equilibrium price is going down, equilibrium quantity is going up. So for case 2, price decreases and quantity increases. Right? So if you were asked what happens to market equilibrium when both demand increases and supply increases, what would you say? It depends. In one case, price went up. In other case, price went down, right? So the price can both go up or go down, but notice that quantity always goes up. You all see that? Thank you very much.
Have a good weekend.
Exactly. This is the right extent.